Howdy again, that's Mr. Peter, Interweb Shop Teacher. Welcome back. And I'm continuing on making videos here with a little UNIMAT lathe. But what I want to do today is make a little milling table, drilling table that fastens right onto the cross slide here. So I do not have one, but I'm going to cut right now to a real quick clip, short one, at Lost Creek Machine, where they do have a little UNIMAT with that table. And I wanted to get dimensions off of it, and that was the purpose of that short trip. It turns out that it's 3x5, the same as an index card. Well, let's cut to that right now, and then I'll come back and tell you what I'm going to do here. Only this one is set up in the milling or drilling mode with the head vertical so that you can compare the two. Remember, these are multi-purpose machines: mill, drill, lathe, sander, saw, etc., etc. So the purpose of that little table is as follows. This is a multi-purpose machine, and it can be set up, as shown in that other film, into a vertical milling machine drill press. So with the motor in the upright position, I'm not going to do that right now, we can drill our work, but the work has to be fastened some way, and the little cross slide here is not nearly big enough. So that's the purpose of the milling table, which will have 3 T-slots in it, as you just have seen. And since this is already roughed out, 3x5 off camera, I'm not going to show that. And by the way, this is a piece of cast aluminum, 1/2 inch thick. It is not rolled aluminum, although the sample I made is made of rolled aluminum. But anyway, this cast aluminum was a large foundry match plate, and the aluminum had been ground, and this is perfectly flat. No waves in it or warping or anything like that, so that's why I wanted to use that. And it's soft enough to cut with a tiny little Tslot cutter. So the whole purpose of going to Lost Creek was to get the dimensions of the T-slots, and there's a couple holes drilled in here as well. Now this won't mean anything to you, but I took measuring instruments over there, and I laid out the 3 T-slots, and there'll be 4 holes, so I found the measurements for those as well. Now these can be purchased on eBay, but they're, I think, $80 or $100 for an original cast iron one. I don't have that kind of money, and since I'm a machinist, I'm going to make one. Now I'm not going to show the layout. I already have die on this, so I'll lay this out with the height gauge, and then we are ready to go over to the milling machine. But before we do, let me show you something else. So several days ago I made up this sample of rolled aluminum, and I did cut 3 T-slots, so it is very doable. Again, this is just a sample, but the whole procedure here is to take a 5/16 end mill and cut a slot to whatever the depth is. I'll tell you later on. Once the slot has been made, a Woodruff cutter, not a T-slot cutter. I do not have a T-slot cutter this small, but this will work. But as you can imagine, it's incredibly delicate right there at the neck. That would be so easy to break off. So the whole idea here is I'm going to slot it out into a T-slot. And when I do that, again, this cutter is not quite thick enough, so after I make my initial cut, I will go in just a little bit deeper, or should I say I'm going to raise it. I forgot which one that I do. So it'll take several passes. That is, one pass with this, actually several passes with this down to the full depth, and then starting to chew away with this. And I'll only show you how to do one slot because it will be, of course, repetitive. But what I'm showing you here is something that you may be able to use in other projects, because very unlikely that anybody would do something so foolish, but I'm going to. Alright, let me do the layout off camera. This picture is taken out of the original UNIMAT manual. There's no pictures or anything. They just call this part number DB1210, along with the table and several fasteners. So that's all I have to go by, other than pictures I have seen on eBay and the video that I took over there at Lost Creek Machine. Okay, the layout is complete. It looks like 3 Lionel train tracks, doesn't it? Well, the middle line is the center line of each slot. I don't know if that was necessary. You could do your layout right on the milling machine as well. And notice that even though this is a metric product, it is 1 inch between the center line right here, and then another 1 inch over here. So that's simple enough, and I will be using the digital readout, but I will not show that in the video. Okay, the work is set up in the Bridgeport mill. Notice that I did make a little sketch, and I took these dimensions directly off of the cross slide of the UNIMAT itself. So the work is up on parallels, tightened down nicely, and the first thing I'm doing here is taking a wiggler, and you could do this in all different kinds of ways. You could edge find here, but it's going to be plenty accurately enough for me to locate the center line of the center slot. So let's do that. Okay, there I am, and I will now set the x-axis, or I should say y, for 0. The total depth of each slot is 290 thousandths. I think I'll make it 300, easier to remember. So what I'll do here is bring the quill down until the tool is touching off, lock the quill, back it up, and I'm going to take that in 3 passes, 100 thousandths each. I have zeroed out the graduated collar, and I'm raising the table 100 thousandths. Put your safety glasses on and we're ready to cut. Okay, this will be pass 2. So I raise the table another 100 thousandths, and I'm just feeding back in the other direction. Okay, that's the end of pass 2, so I will raise the table up another 100 thousandths and go back the other direction, and then I am at full depth. Pass 3. Okay, that's the end of pass 3. Now what I'm going to do is clean everything off here, and I will mill to depth the other 2 slots. I think we missed that. The other 2 slots to full depth. I'm not going to show that because it's a repetition, and I'm moving in the Y direction now, exactly 1 inch either way. Again, I won't show that. I'll be back in 2 seconds, but actually it's about 20 minutes. Okay, all 3 slots cut to full depth. Let's clean it up and change cutters and get ready to use the Woodruff key cutter. Do not blow your chips off with compressed air. Use a vacuum cleaner. Okay, I've mounted the Tslot cutter. Again, I will touch off, just coming down and gently touching the work. You could put a piece of paper in there if you wanted, and then back it away from the work, and I'm going to raise the table up by 300 thousandths, which is the depth of the slot. By the way, that was a very, very slow speed. I didn't want to break the cutter, and I'll do that 2 more times. Well, that's a relief. I made it through all 3 slots without breaking that little delicate cutter off. I was very hesitant to tell you what I'm going to tell you now, because maybe you don't need to know, but at this point the T-bolt will not fit in there because the thickness of the cutter that's still in the mill, and this is a different cutter, it's only 95 thousandths thick right here. And we need, what did I say, 130 thousandths. So I can also measure a slot. This is a Stanley taper gauge. Did you ever use one? But we'll just put it right in there, and up to my fingernail here, I can see that the depth is, I'm upside down, I'm right at 95,000. I know I'm moving all over the place. So my point here now is, in order to get this the right thickness so that the bolt will go in there, I am going to raise the table by 35 or 40 thousandths and take a pass through each one of the slots, and then the bolt should fit in. Did you follow that? Is that clear as mud? Okay, I'll clean that slot out and see if this fits. I'm on the other end of the work now, and I cleaned it out, and look, that T-bolt fits in there just absolutely perfectly. So I still have 2 more to do, and then it's done. I won't show that. I'll be back in a couple minutes to summarize this. Never remove your work from the vise until you're darn sure that it's done. So I've taken the T-bolt and I've run it into all 3 slots, and it fits just fine. So I am at liberty to take the work out and clean it real well and deburr it, and then I'll see you over at the workbench where we still have a couple things to do. Are we having fun? I am. Is everybody happy? Okay, there it is. No runs, no hits, no errors. I want to clarify something before I go on. I used a cutter, not this one, but one just like it. Again, this is for cutting half-moon key slots, or woodruff keys. These are actual cutters for T-slots. Notice the staggered teeth? Quite a bit different, but I did not have one the right size. Maybe they don't even make one that size. So I substituted the woodruff cutter, and it worked just fine, didn't it? Just wanted to make a point of that. I laid out the 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I got those dimensions over at Lost Creek. Now that will allow, we only use 2 holes at a time, but that allows you to position this in 8 different positions. So you can 1, 2, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, because you got 2 positions there, and it could also be mounted like this. So there's all kinds of ways of doing that, of mounting it, depending on how big your work is that you're drilling or milling, because this is really still a tiny little table when you think about it, but it's a heck of a lot bigger than this. Okay, next I wanted to tell you that these bolts here, these T-bolts, along with these little toe clamps, is what is actually meant to go in these slots to hold down your small work for drilling and milling. These 4 holes are probably meant to be drilled and tapped 6 millimeter. Now I do have some metric taps, and I could do that, but I don't have the metric screws. So what will a fellow do? I know it's blasphemy, but I do have in just a few in this box of 1224 by 3/4 long. So these are imperial size. So that's what I'm going to make them, because I got the fasteners, I got the drills and the taps, and you can see that a 6 millimeter and a number 12 aren't too much different. So off camera I will drill and countersink these 4 holes, counter bore I mean. Then I have to make some tiny little T-nuts. These are T-bolts. I will just need the nut portion that I will tap 1224, and I will not show any of that, but I'll be back in a little while, actually almost instantly, with with all of that work done, and it might even be the next day because I've been at this for about 4 hours, although I'm having a lot of fun. Well, it's the next day and I've already been working for about an hour, but this is what it looks like after it is drilled and counterbored. 4 holes, ready to go. And the next thing I needed to do was to take these 12/24 cap screws and shorten them. That was kind of fiddly because they're already kind of short and they have to be just right. So then I wasted, or I should say, I spent all kinds of time making these tiny little T-nuts with a 12/24 thread, and they fit perfectly. Well, let me zoom in. Okay, zoomed in here a little bit. You can see that they fit very nicely in the T-slot, but the problem is they are so thin that I'm only getting, maybe 2 threads in there at the most. So I redesigned them and spent another hour, and they look something like, well, they look exactly like this, so that I have a longer thread engagement. But these were fiddly also. I mean, this took me a lot of time. Matter of fact, I could have made a 15-minute video on these alone, but I spared you. I do have a still picture I'll flash on the screen right now. So look at the nice fit that I've got. But you know, there's drilling and tapping and milling and turning and just all kinds of operations on a little piece like that. But we've got a good fit. They do not come up over the top. A little bit of space there. All right, enough talking about these insignificant little items. Let me go ahead and mount the little table. Before I bolt them down, one other thing I wanted to say here is that, as I told you earlier, this can be mounted in several positions. I think they said 8, but I don't really see that. So that would be one, that would be another, and then it could also be mounted like this, or like this. And reversed here, I'd have to move the carriage down a little bit because we've got interference here. You can see that this pretty well fills the space, can you not? But I thought it also could be mounted like this, but there is an interference here with the little hand wheel. See how I'm striking the hand wheel? Anyway, I think I covered that well enough. Let me go ahead off camera and mount this in at least one of the positions, and then we're pretty much done. Okay, here it is. That's one position, of course, and then these tiny little clamps will hold your work down for milling and drilling. Well, this was a big job. I think I got 4 or 5 hours in on this. So now the $80 or $90 price on Feebay seems quite reasonable. But it was a fun job, and perhaps making these little T-slots will be of interest to some of you that have a job similar to this, even if it is not a UNIMAT. Well, that completes this little job. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it. So stay busy in your shop during this cold weather. It's so much better than watching TV or just gambling or something like that. So be sure and watch my other videos. There's 1,500 of them, and there'll be a lot more videos on this little UNIMAT. If you liked this, give me a thumbs up and tell your friends, and I'll see you in my next video. So long for now. Oh, a few still pictures at the end. Stay tuned. Clean up!